For us at Steps, travel isn't simply about places, destinations, or sites. It's about people, about getting to know people, about understanding people, unconditional and sometimes unplanned moments that make connections. Now, in my travels, I've been lucky enough to meet some extraordinary people, charismatic guides, generous hosts, and captivating storytellers, but perhaps none more so than Hanli Prinsloo. So I'm just trying to get Hanli on board now. Hanli.
Hi, Justin.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, I'm great. All the better for seeing you. It's a pleasure and privilege to have you here with us. You are my favorite mermaid. What do I mean? What do I mean by that? Well, you're an amazing freediver, but above all, for me, you're such an amazing champion, an amazing advocate for the oceans, which, as we know, are the lungs of our planet. More on that in a bit. But freediving. Most of our audience will know what freediving is, but not all. So tell me, what is freediving?
Sure, Justin. I'm so glad to join you this evening. It is nighttime in Cape Town, and so good to be chatting with you this evening about freediving, my most favorite thing ever. And freediving is both a sport and a recreational activity, and it is the art, I would say, of holding your breath and diving down underwater. And it's diving as a competitive sport, as deep, as far, or as long as possible on one single breath. But of course, as a recreational activity, as soon as you're swimming in the ocean, you take a breath and you dive down, you're free diving.
And so how did a young girl who grew up on a horse farm not far from Johannesburg get involved in freediving in the oceans?
Well, it definitely started on that farm. I grew up on a beautiful piece of land outside Johannesburg, and yes, my dad was a horse breeder, and I'm a big fan of just wild nature and wilderness. And we were lucky enough on the farm to have two small rivers, one big dam, and a swimming pool. And in these bodies of water, my sister and I kind of found our aquatic selves, and we would swim underwater, and we even tried to talk to each other underwater. We developed this whole squeaking underwater language, which I now realize, obviously, we were talking bottlenose dolphin to each other. But it was just this discovering the stillness and this beauty of being underwater already as a young girl. But, you know, we lived 8 hours drive from the closest ocean. And as many of us do, thinking of wanting to spend more time underwater, I got into scuba diving. And I felt so disappointed. It was just not what I had expected. I wanted to move freely in the water. I wanted that quiet. I wanted to feel like I was part of the environment. And scuba diving, I felt like I was in a safari vehicle, right? I was a visitor, and I wanted to be one with the ocean. And it was actually, I moved when I was 19 to Sweden, and I was studying in Sweden, of all places. I mean, this is like a real plot twist in how I got into freediving. But in Sweden, I met this very, he was so passionate about the ocean and about freediving. And he said to me, have you heard about freediving? And in Swedish, it's fridykning. And I was like, maybe this is a language thing. Maybe my Swedish isn't good enough. What is he talking about freediving? Nothing is free here, basically. And then he explained it to me, and it was like just the penny dropped. It was like, that's what I've been wanting to do. And so I started freediving in the fjords in Sweden, and that's basically where I discovered freediving.
Well, that's quite a place to start freediving. And I was going to ask, sort of, freediving must take you to some quite sort of dark and lonely places, both metaphorically and literally. But so how do you prepare yourself or mentally for each dive that you do?
Freediving definitely is, I think, would say, you know, an 80% mental and 20% physical sport. It's all in your head and your ears and what's between your ears. And the training for freediving starts much earlier than the day of the dive or even the month of the dive. It's a real lifestyle. I would say freediving is a lifestyle more than a sport. It's what you eat, it's how you breathe, it's how you move through your everyday life. And narrowing it down to when I was competing, that was a lot about trying to really get my body at its best for holding its breath, you know, so eating an alkaline diet, which would help with how the blood takes up oxygen, all the way to, you know, the yoga stretching I would do to expand my lung volume, And then on the day, you know, lots of resting and then preparing mentally for this deep dive, because wanting to breathe is one of our body's greatest. We're hardwired to want to breathe, right? From the very first breath we take, it's something our body does reflexively. We have many reflexive systems in the body, but the breath is the one that we can control the most. And so when we do control it and we ask the body to stop breathing, it goes into a bit of a tailspin. And so it's learning how to deal with that mental side. So I would say the mental preparation and learning how to quiet the mind is even bigger than the physical preparation.
And when you've been diving, you face sort of challenging moments, either mentally or indeed physically, I'm sure. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think my deep dives have been my greatest learning ground, learning more about myself, learning more about my body, both strengths and weaknesses, you know, not only the good or the bad, and learning about the ocean. And I think for me, freediving started with the fascination of what my body could do and overcoming these challenges mentally and physically. And then as I started freediving more, it became more about the ocean and less about me as the athlete. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. A couple of quick stats then. So how deep have you gone and how long have you held your breath for? Because I know that one talk that I've seen you do, you're playing a video of you swimming lengths in a pool. And the whole time you ask the audience to hold their breath, and meanwhile you're still going backwards and forwards.
Right. That's right. So in freediving, we have these different disciplines, and in depth, you either go down with the help of equipment. So, for example, if you've seen Le Grand Bleu or the Big Blue, where they go down with the weighted system. I never really got into those disciplines. I was much more interested in what my own body could do at my own strength. So swimming down just breaststroke, I swam down to about 56 meters and back up again. Back up again is important. Yeah. Down and then back up again. It's like you summit Everest and then you start to come down, right? Freediving is the same. It's not just reaching your depth, it's getting back up again. And then with my monofin, which is of course the big kind of dolphin tail fin, I swam down to 65 meters and back up. And then the video you're referring to is called Dynamic Apnea No Fin. So it's swimming in a swimming pool lengths underwater as far as you can. So it's not about time or depth, it's about distance. And that specific dive, I did about 126 meters, holding my breath. And it took just over 3 minutes.
Okay.
So that's kind of a very slow swim. And then just floating face down in the water, holding your breath is possibly the least, what would you call it? The least spectator-friendly sport ever. And that's called static apnea. And in static apnea, I've held my breath for 6 minutes.
Oh. You mentioned earlier about scuba diving, and annoyingly you felt it's like being a safari vehicle. I've just persuaded my children to do their PADI, and they disqualified last year. Now they're going to listen to this and go, "Oh, now we've got to do free diving." But so what is the difference for you when you're underwater with marine animals? That they behave differently because you haven't got an aqua lung on you. There's no bubbles coming out as such, or
completely. So I mean, and just. For your kids as well, like anything that gets us in the ocean and gets us in the water is great, right? There's no like bad thing, except maybe riding jet skis, which I hate because they frighten dolphins. But other than that, I think getting in and on the water is always a good thing. But for me, scuba diving, firstly, I think especially if you're I'm not a very large human, the equipment feels very big and very heavy. So it makes me feel bulky in the water. And one of the things I love about being underwater is how weightless and free and acrobatic one can feel, right? Which on land, unless you're a dancer or a gymnast, you lose that because we kind of weighted down by gravity. Whereas underwater, on one breath, you go down and you can move like a seal and you find that weightless movement underwater. And you don't get that with a tank because you shouldn't be going up and down in the water column. You should stay down. And also just because of how the equipment is on you. And then on top of that, it's loud. I mean, breathing air underwater is like, I mean, that's literally what it sounds like. And, especially the larger marine animals, especially the mammals, they just don't like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's very noisy in a quiet world. So the encounters we as freedivers get with animals is just better.
But it's not just not having the aqualung with you that gives you that sort of sense of freedom and acrobatic. I've been lucky enough to go swimming with you in southern Mozambique with dolphins. To describe me in the water as acrobatic would be totally wrong.
No, you were fantastic.
You on the other hand were absolutely amazing, and the dolphins were very much attracted to you because of that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they recognize, right? They recognize that you're moving like them, you're coming up to breathe and then going down. So, you know, we do have this kinship with the aquatic mammals. And when we're moving like them, breathing like them, behaving like them underwater, they're interested. So I think it's a matter of really noticing how the animals are curious about us when we're freediving. And that's something that you get places in the world where, you know, the manta rays or the whale sharks are habituated to the bubbles of the scuba and they like it tickling their tummies and stuff, but that's more like a sensory experience for them. They're not really engaging with the diver. Whereas when you're freediving, you really get those eye-to-eye meetings of, you know, sentient beings meeting. And that is really, for me, the biggest gift freediving has given me.
So in terms of engagement with marine mammals and stuff, what are some of the most sort of surprising that you've been lucky enough to have?
I mean, you mentioned the dolphins in southern Mozambique, and you know, for anybody who's had the opportunity to encounter a dolphin, it really is, I think, one of life's greatest experiences. You know, they're just so intelligent and so interactive, and yeah, they're really curious about us, and it feels like you're the chosen one when they want to play with you in a way. And I had the opportunity when I was pregnant with our daughter. I was 7 months pregnant, and we went up to Mozambique to swim with that same pod of dolphins that I'd been swimming with for over 15 years. And as you know, many might know, or if you don't, dolphins use echolocation sonar through the water that allows them to basically see through the water the way it works. So they can, for example, spot fish under the sand, or, you know, behind seaweeds, or in vast, you know, kilometers of or hundreds of meters of water. They can use their sonar to see. So what they do is they can actually scan the human body, and then they see the baby inside. And they are incredibly curious about another pregnant being in the water. And dolphins being a matriarchal society where the females are, you know, leadership and the most revered, the pregnant female is like, you know, protected and taken care of. So getting into the water pregnant, the dolphins just responded completely differently. It was absolutely incredible. They all just circled around and started scanning me, and were basically the first ones to see our baby, you know, on their own sonar. And, you know, they name you, they name each other, they name people who get in the water with them. So they were clicking and giving her a name as well. So before we'd even named her. So that was, I think, one of my greatest highlights, really, was getting to do that.
Given that you spoke dolphin from an early age with your sister in the rivers near Johannesburg or wherever, you must have been able to translate the name that they gave your daughter.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But, I mean, I wish.
So you mentioned echolocation. You're in one of my, well, not just in, but very much part of one of my favorite books, The Deep by James Nestor. And when you in Sri Lanka, I think you were swimming with sperm whales, if my memory serves me right.
That's right.
Talk to me about, or us about that experience.
So the sperm whales in Sri Lanka, and James, I mean, he's just such an incredible writer. If you haven't read James Nestor's book, Deep, it really is an incredible foray into freediving and the world of breath hold and the world of being underwater. We had the opportunity to, and it was actually the second time that I'd been in Sri Lanka, to dive off the coast of the east side of Sri Lanka with the sperm whales. And you get these big pods of sperm whales there. And they are incredibly intimidating creatures. You know, any of us who've read Moby Dick or In the Heart of the Sea, you know how smart they are. You know that they can hold a grudge according to according to the books. But more than anything, just how large they are. And so for me, getting in the water with over 60 sperm whales all around me was probably one of the most frightening things I'd done. Mainly because I thought to myself, what if I get in and they're so smart and they scan me and they don't like me, right? I had this real like imposter syndrome thing. What if they see right through me and they find me lacking? It was quite a intimidating moment. And I just got in the water and these two females, huge whales, just turned, and they weren't looking at me with their eyes, they were scanning me. So the same way that the dolphins use echolocation to scan, the sperm whales do the same. And it was this like loud ticking, this tick, 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 as they were scanning. I could like feel it in my sternum. And I just kind of opened my arms and I hung there in the water, and I just thought and like emoted at them, you're so big, you're so beautiful, thank you for letting me be here, thank you for letting me be here, because that's literally what I wanted them to feel and experience. And they turned and they just looked me in the eye, that big eye to eye moment. And yeah, it shifted things for me, right? It really shifted things for me.
I'm glad they didn't find you lacking, because we certainly don't, not least because you're freediving, but also the amazing work that you do in ocean conservation. So you set up I Am Water, the foundation. So tell us a bit about that and the work that you do with that foundation.
Sure. So I think for me, the ocean has given me so much, and I feel such a strong love and deep connection with the ocean that this is something I want many people to experience. And having traveled the world with freediving and experienced these spectacular interactions with big animals and incredible oceans, firstly, coming home to South Africa and to Cape Town, I was just blown away with what we actually have right here on our doorstep. You know, we don't have to be traveling so far to have such incredible experiences. And secondly, how few South Africans actually have access to that. And it's the same all around the world, right? Access to nature is not equitable. There is a real dividing line about who has access to nature, particularly the ocean, because you need some skills to access the ocean. And because of South Africa's past, you know, beaches were whites only, pools were whites only. There's been this generational divide from the ocean and from the ability to swim. And just being on the beach here in South Africa just really struck me how unrepresentative our ocean is of our country. And so I'm Water was born out of that deep desire to see more South Africans have an opportunity to experience the ocean. So what we do with I'm Water Foundation is we work with grade 7 students from local schools, and we bring them from school. So when morning bell goes.
What age is grade 7? It's
grade 7 is 12.
12, okay.
So they're 11, 12 years old. So when the morning bell goes, they get on a bus and they come to the beach where our amazing team of coaches meet them. Then they get into some really warm and comfortable wetsuits. Well, first, actually, they get to do a stretching exercise and breath work and get to learn about their own body and their connection to the ocean through their breath. And then we guide them through some talking about what the ocean gives us and why it's valuable. And then they split into 3 groups and go through a station of rock pool exploration and intertidal zone and a beach cleanup and understanding our connection to the destruction of the ocean. And then they also get to snorkel. So all these children get to, for the first time, for most of them, the first time ever, put on a wetsuit, put on a mask and snorkel and see what's under the water. At the end of the day, we do a sharing circle, and this workshop is called the Ocean Guardians Workshop, and it's a 2-day workshop. And we work with the Department of Education in the Western Cape. So this is actually something that's part of the department's work, which is phenomenal because we really want to reach as many children as we can. So we have a coaching community of over 40 coaches who work with us, who host the kids on the beach. And so it's also in South Africa, we have some of the highest unemployment rates in the world. So also training coaches from these same communities to become community level conservationists is incredibly important to us. And Justin, it's just, you know, being on the beach and seeing the coaches help the kids into their wetsuits, put on a mask, overcome that fear, saying, you know, I can't do it, I can't swim, nobody in my family can swim. And then seeing them float and open their eyes and coming out and saying, my problems felt so far away. We hear that so often, you know, and you're like, you're 11. You know, it's a challenging time for children in general and in our country in particular. And to see them just have a moment in nature and overcome fears and have that experience, it's truly more rewarding than any record ever was.
Oh, amazing. And is it just in South Africa? Do you also work with other organizations in other parts of the world? I think you've done some work in the Bahamas, is that right? Yeah.
We've done some work in Bermuda. We've done some work in Ecuador, in Mozambique, and we actually, as part of our next big project with Iron Water, is that we've started something called the Oceans for All Alliance, where we work with like-minded organizations around the world who want to implement our Ocean Guardians workshop. And we bring them to Cape Town and train them so that they can leapfrog all the learning we've done, right, over the last 10 years to be able to run the workshops at the scale that we do. We don't have time for community-based organizations around the world to take 10 years to figure out how to have true impact. And so we bring these organizations and leaders to Cape Town and train them so that they can implement this program in their own community around the world. So that's a program that's just launched, and we're super excited about that.
Well, amazing work, and the lots of comments of sort of flashing out, people saying sort of how well described, how beautiful, amazing, etc. And I'm sure that's one of the many reasons why you, I think it was in 2014, that you were elected by the World Economic Forum to be a young global leader, which is an amazing accolade. So well done you. But what was that like? What did it mean for you? And I don't know, what have you learned from it? Who have you met through it, etc.?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for me to see, you know, what competitive freediving gave me, and then what working in the nonprofit world and really working towards values and vision, you know, has given. And it was an interesting time because I had just stopped competing, and a part of me, you know, like that little voice in your ear is like, if you stop competing and you stop breaking records, you won't be relevant anymore. You know, there's that voice that's always like questioning. And it was literally 2 years after I had stopped competing, but was spending all my time developing Iron Water, that I got this email from the World Economic Forum inviting me into the Young Global Leader Network. And I've had some interesting experiences with that, you know, being invited to speak at Davos, to doing leadership modules at Harvard. But I think the greatest gift I got from that is meeting other African leaders who are passionate about our continent and who are passionate about the people on the African continent. You know, I think that to me was the greatest inspiration, is that, you know, I don't need to be going to Switzerland or New York to be inspired. Like for me, I find like some of the most inspiring leaders and thought leaders are right here in my country and on my continent, and just really finding that community, I think, is one of the biggest things.
I think that's so well said and so well put, because of the African Leadership University are doing amazing work along those very lines. So well on you. And so, are you optimistic or you pessimistic about the state of the oceans? And I say that because here in the UK, in the Guardian last week, and the BBC, there was scientists talking about 170 trillion pieces of plastic in the oceans. What are your thoughts? What are your views?
Yeah, I mean, I think
big question, by the way. That's a big question.
That's a big question. That's a big question. I mean, you know, I don't think one can be an informed citizen without understanding that it's crunch time for the planet in general, right? Whether it's for the oceans or climate change or the forests, it just is crunch time. And the decisions we make and have been making over the last couple of decades and in the next few years, we will be, you know, reaping the outcomes of those forever, and as will our children and, you know, children's children. I'm a naturally optimistic person, and I think the only way I stay optimistic is by spending a lot of time in the water. Mm-hmm. And when I spend time behind my computer and I try and solve problems from that place, I can get feel quite defeated by that. Whereas, you know, today I was in the kelp forest today for several hours, you know, and so it's a good day to ask me how I feel, because it's like I swam side to side with a little leopard cat shark, and, you know, he was doing fine and the kelp forest is flourishing and there's so much left to protect, and I feel optimistic, right? And then other times I've been diving, you know, in Indonesia in the rainy season when the rivers come down, and, you know, just watching manta rays open their mouths, and as they're filtering water to feed, they're also filtering in plastic. And I just swim around, you know, with tears in my mask, just pulling plastic into a bag, like trying to, and it's like, you know, you just can't bail it out fast enough. So I think if for us to stay potent in our work and for us to stay active in our work, we have to both be very aware of what the challenges are, but have a direct connection to the power socket that keeps us motivated and keeps us excited, because otherwise the work becomes too heavy. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Justin, because, you know, in the last 2 weeks, we've had news about, you know, protection of the ocean, but at the same time, new science coming in on the, you know, plastics and the destruction of. So I think it's really about staying active in what we're doing. I find that those who are and continue to be the most optimistic are the ones who feel like they are making a difference. And those who feel the most hopeless probably need to get stuck in and start really, you know, working somewhere towards these solutions, because then you actually feel more connected to the solution and you can find optimism again.
Wow. Wonderfully articulate as ever. When you said protecting the oceans, you're referring to 30 by 30 then? Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about that? And
well, I mean, I just think that all these initiatives, and especially the ones that invite and include so many different countries and nations, are so vitally important. But once again, nothing means anything unless we enforce them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the big question on 30 and 30. If all these decisions on creating protected spaces, it needs to happen. First, the decision needs to be made, and that has been done, and that's fantastic. And then we need to be held accountable and hold others accountable and enforce it, because otherwise it's just talk, and the ocean doesn't fare any better from just talk.
So you do amazing work, and I know that you with friends, colleagues like Joe Ruxton and Sylvia Earle, etc. But what about us? What can we do, and how can we make a difference, or how can we help create the change that you are striving for and champion the oceans in the same way as you? So what do you say to people who join you on a trip, or to your young students in Cape Town or wherever?
Well, I think firstly, you know, I always encourage people to just find your own connection with nature. You know, for me, it's the ocean, whether it's, you know, a river near to where you are, or a mountain, or a pond, or just a tree. You know, some people don't have access to spectacular nature right where they are, but, you know, if we look close enough, nature is fighting to be where we are, and, you know, fighting to be near us. Like, there is places we can find, and is to find that connection and let it come from there. That's always my first place, and to find moments that you can be in your nature connection. And then I think to really take a little bit of almost like a little bit of a personal audit, you know, and see, well, what are the things I prioritize? How do I live? What are the things that feel sustainable for me to make a change, right? Like, we all know how and what we eat affects our planet. So if you live in a place where it makes sense and is the better choice to eat less meat and more plant-based, and you have access to good plant-based foods, excellent. If you live in a place where you have access to the right kind of reared meat and that's what you're needing to do, then that's excellent. You know, if you're living in a place where you shouldn't probably be eating seafood because it's deeply exploited, then don't do that. But if you are some of the many people who only can eat seafood, then of course you can't be expected not to. Make the right choices, because if there's something we do all the time, right, it's eat. And so we can have a huge impact through what we eat and how we eat. And so it demands a little bit about us. Inform yourself and learn about where you are and how those choices are best made, because this is a local question as well. And then the other things we consume, right? Like, what is it you buy when you're buying clothes? How informed are we about fast fashion? Like, how do we know where our things are made, how they're made? Because then it becomes a bigger question again, not just because the well-being of our planet is also the well-being of all of us, right? Like, how are the people who are making your clothes, and how does that sit with you? Because oftentimes things that aren't good for people in, you know, countries where there's a lot of strife and inequality is usually not good for the planet either. And so one can start seeing those correlations and start making better choices. So that's the one where I would say vote with your wallet, you know, the things you buy. And that's the same of how you travel, who you travel with, where you travel, how you travel. If you travel often, do you think about your footprint, and how do you think about it? You know, these questions are all complex, and they demand of us to make a bit of an effort. But when we do, it feels good. It feels good to say, I've bought something I'm going to wear and own for a long time. And that's a, you know, valuable choice I've just made. And, you know, I can eat more plant-based. I have fantastic fresh produce where I live, so I can make that decision. And then it's not about being perfect all the time. I think that's a barrier to entry.
I think that's very right. And you say that sometimes they're very complex problems, and it's to fly or not to fly, but we should fly less. But it's not a question of whether it's not a binary decision necessarily.
No, not at all.
And again, when you're talking about sort of what we wear, I think that's hugely important, and what we wear in the ocean as well. Are there sort of certain brands that you use that we should use going forward? I remember a few years ago you managed to persuade me to wear a pair of mermaid leggings. I don't know how many other people you persuaded to do that, but more seriously, sorry,
not that many men.
Not many men. But again, it's being sort of careful about the brands that you use.
Exactly. And I think what is exciting is we are living in a time where we have more choices, right? I mean, 20 years ago or something, we could have said, oh, but there's not that much choice, or where I am, I can't really make these decisions. But I think more and more now, there are many opportunities to make better choices. And I think that's kind of, again, when you ask me about being optimistic, that is one of the things that makes me feel optimistic, that there are better choices. And as we know better, we can do better. And that's why I also think it's part of this journey is educating oneself, and then picking those things that you feel, this feels authentic to me and this feels sustainable. These are the choices I can make that can have a better impact.
And what about the next challenges for you? What are the next few months, even years, hold for you?
Well, I have a 5-month-old baby.
Yeah.
So whatever he's going
through. You didn't name after me. I'm really disappointed, though.
Sleep is a challenge. So what the next few weeks hold is trying to sleep more. But it's just been phenomenal. You know, like Peter and I, you know, became parents during the pandemic. Ava was born in April 2020. So the last few years have seen our lives change a lot, you know, with we were planning on traveling less once we started, you know, having kids anyway, and then the pandemic happened. So in a way for us, it was a very natural progression into traveling less. And now that things are really picking back up again, really being quite deliberate about how we travel and when we travel and where we go, and whether we can, you know, go as a family when we do, and do longer trips and less, you know, less flying, which feels right. And so we're also working on a really exciting project at the moment that we're busy developing. So I'll be able to share more about that soon, but it's in line of sustainability and being able to explore the ocean in a more sustainable way. You were talking about what we wear in the sea and how that impacts the ocean, and how we can make better choices. So I look forward to telling you and your peeps more about that soon. So that's a big project for us. And then really just, I think, continuing the work that we do with I'm Water. And also I love sharing the kelp forests with people, you know. So that's something that I also realized during, you know, COVID times, was that there were so many people, even here in Cape Town, who hadn't experienced the kelp forest. So I started teaching these water women courses, teaching freediving to women in particular who didn't feel like it was there for them, you know. And off the back of that, Peter and I have been running some courses with people coming out to explore Cape Town, because Cape Town is such an incredible city and it's famous for so many things. And people know that we have two oceans. There's wines called Two Oceans, but they don't really think of Cape Town as an ocean destination, right? It's like the mountain, it's the food, it's the wine. But I'm really enjoying hosting people in Cape Town and showing them my blue backyard right here.
And so, am I right in thinking the seven-gilled shark is in the kelp forest there, or was...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Justin, we could have a whole conversation just about that poor flipping seven-gill shark. So we used to have a marine protected area with a resident population of seven-gill sharks. And any given day, I could be like, if the weather's good, I'm going to show you a seven-gill shark, and we could go diving. And these are like up to 3-meter large, prehistoric, fossil-like sharks. But I don't know how much you know about the orcas in Cape Town.
Orcas come in, yes.
So we've had 2 very opportunistic orca come in. Their names are Port and Starboard because their dorsal fins have collapsed to either side for whatever reason. It's not that common in the wild. And these 2 orcas have just been terrorizing our shark populations. So partly the great white sharks have actually moved out of False Bay and more up the coast, which is why you're seeing more activity in Plettenberg Bay and Jeffreys Bay. And if you've seen like what happened to Mick Fanning during the J-Bay Open, there's just more sharks moving up the coast because they've been kind of pressurized by these orca here in False Bay. And the seven-gill sharks, one day they were there and the next day they were gone. And they've moved away, which is obviously because they're trying to hide from the orcas. But just last week or 2 weeks ago, actually, the orcas were spotted in Gansbaai area, just outside of just like 3 hours away from Cape Town. And they spotted those 2 orcas for 2 days. And the day after and the day after that, 17 seven-gill sharks washed up on the beach with their livers eaten.
With their livers eaten.
And these orcas are so specific. There's obviously something in the liver that they need, and that's something got to do with what they would normally predate on. They're not predating on in the same way. Most likely, probably something we've done somewhere along the food chain. And now they're predating on the seven-gills, and they do the same with great white sharks. You'll see great white sharks washing up with their liver eaten. So that's I feel like in South Africa right now, we are really experiencing a lot of the impact of a changing climate, a changing ocean, a changing food chain. The African penguins are under challenge because they're having to swim so far to find their fish. So exactly, Bridget's question. It's seven-gill sharks, but they also predate on the great white sharks when they can, but the seven-gills are easier. So our African penguin is needing to swim further out to find fish and is already highly endangered, which, if we don't, they expect the African penguin to be functionally extinct within my lifetime. So we really are on the knife edge here in Cape Town with a lot of our wildlife. We're seeing a lot of the effects happening, which again makes it a place that is very, in a way, inspirational to be working in this field, because you can really see it's right here, it's happening. What are we doing?
Well, you are so inspirational to us all. So please carry on that work. And I think we have to stop shortly, but there have been some great comments. There's somebody from Kilimanjaro, from the Maldives, from all over the world who are listening to your words of wisdom. Is there anything else you want to say or just reflect on, or I don't know, maybe an experience when you've been free diving or swimming with dolphins, sperm whales, whatever it might be?
I think, as always, Justin, it's just for me encouraging people to spend time in nature, and not to think that it needs to be, not every experience needs to be a bucket list experience. Not everything needs to be in, the bluest water, the furthest away. It's like, find a way of being near nature, water if you can, that works in your everyday life and that you can be a part of, because it is so deeply needed in the world we live in today. The way we engage with technology, the way we engage with each other, the way we are our better selves when we are in nature. You know, and I think that would really be what I would encourage people to do. And whether that is on an incredible, you know, once-off experience with whale sharks or dolphins or something somewhere in the world, or whether it's just finding that little place that you can go to and find that works for you, that's close to you. I think, you know, I think that's just really what I'm really feeling at the moment, is just how much we need nature.
As ever, well said, well put. You're a star. Just for the audience, Peter, who you referred to earlier on, is the second best backstroker that you know. Is that right?
Who's the first? You.
Yeah. You've got to tell him that. I've got to mess with his head. You said it's like 80% mental, 20% physical. I've got to have some sort of mental advantage over Peter somehow. So
okay, I'll tell him. I'll tell him that you're trying to play intimidation tactics on him. Oh, no, I mean it's great to chat, Justin. We've had so many great ocean experiences together, you know. And what I was saying earlier with the decisions we can all make, you know, I've really seen how you and the guys at Steps Travel are really trying to, you know, help people travel in a way that's more conscious, make more thoughtful decisions, and how you work with service providers and local communities and everything. And I think that's kind of my wish, you know, is that people will just be a little bit more conscious and deliberate in every little action, because then it becomes a lifestyle and then it actually has impact. Yeah.
Well, you're an absolute star, Hanli. It's so good to speak to you. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you very soon. But thank you again for being who you are, being the inspiration that you are to so many people. And as I said, comments just coming through, the sort of thanks, sort of hands together, saying thank you. So take care.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Right. Hope to see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.